Chapter 131, An Astounding Retreat. Shock and horror passed through the minds of every single ruler of the demon world as they felt the death of yet another one of their peers, and in such a short instance at that. Yet another channel of communication was opened as the rulers congregated, and found the one to be missing was the one they all had immense trust in for the ability to keep themselves hidden and safe as they could disappear to the ends of the world at the slightest sign of trouble. There was only silence in the communication channel as an inviolable calm voice that was filled with wrath at the same time rang out, "Pull out all forces from the beast world." There was another period of silence after the rulers heard this command. Nobody could raise an objection to it, its will seemingly descending down across the vast worlds they were in. The voice rang out once again, "Blacklist this world and add it to the list. It is not worth the losses to continue a battle with an enemy we do not know." The voice paused for a short moment before continuing, this time directed at a specific person that was also listening closely and seemingly about to erupt. "I don't want to hear anything from you, Barbados. You've defied me long enough. Prepare your forces and be ready to descend to the lost world of Atlantis. The supreme treasure, the trident of Neptune, might be in our grasp in the coming months. Make haste." Humph. An arrogant huff filled with anger that seemed to be screaming, "I told you so," was the only reply to come on the other end as the rest of the rulers remained quiet. The reality of losing two of their peers in this middle world in the corner of the universe gave them a shock, but a reminder at the same time. No matter how confident they were, there were always unexplained beings and mysteries that could take the lives of individuals as powerful as them. They didn't know which terrifying expert they had provoked, but it made no sense to continue sending their forces in a location where even more of them could face true death. The demons were arrogant, deceitful, and strong, but they knew when to pull back when they hit a tough wall. Not a single ruler in the communication channel defied the voice that spoke as they swallowed their anger and talked about how they would move thereafter. The voice that demanded the attention of all of the rulers that neither of them could go against was coming from the ruler that was ranked first in the demon world. The oppressive tyrant, Barbados, sat on a throne made of bones in the center of a destroyed world. A dark miasmic air was floating around as she stood up and looked at her legions of undead that stretched for miles, ferocious-looking skeletons holding jagged swords, deadly liches that could summon droves of zombies. And bone dragons were just among the many undead that she controlled. A dark light escaped from her hands, forming into a black pearl that shone its light towards the legions of undead around her, as if escaping in a black hole. All the powerful figures were sucked into this pearl as Barbados continued to move. She was furious at the old fool that always called the shots, but she couldn't defy him. Even with her terrible level of power, Baal still wasn't someone she could go against. She would have chosen to descend down into that beast world no matter how many treasures they had to use to bypass the laws that protected the middle world. As long as the world was lower level, universal laws would not allow powerful individuals vastly surpassing the level of power that is the peak for that world to descend. Otherwise, every single world would be taken over by the prime worlds by now. Yet, for huge worlds, it did not matter what level you were, as the laws were loose when it came to worlds where powerful figures roamed. This made it much easier to use weak pieces to travel across worlds. For someone like her to descend in a world that only had mythical beings at the peak, the cost was simply too much, so she would take this loss on this beast world that reduced the number of rulers of the demon world to 68. But she would definitely not leave it alone. Expert, huh? What need would there be for you to scurry around if you were such a high being? She wasn't convinced, so she would definitely move to act later. For now though, she would comply with the commands of the tyrant, the lost world of Atlantis. "I haven't been to the sea in quite a while. All right, my darlings, let's go have some fun." Barbados waved her hands as the throes of undead disappeared into the black pearls in her hands. Anger and madness could be felt from her laughter as the necromancer of chaos moved. Things were rapidly changing as huge movements began to occur with the demons at the center of the beast world. The demons that had been advancing this entire time began taking defensive positions and pulled back towards the center of the draconic kingdom. The unwilling demon kings looked at the world that they would have in doubt taken down in time as the command of retreat rang throughout their minds. There were just too many things they didn't know, with the enemy holding a power that directly countered them. It would mean senselessly throwing themselves to get killed if they continued to poke around in the north trying to find out just who held the power to cause a true death. their losses were huge, so they would take them and try to recuperate for the time being. A congregation of essence was abundant around the draconic kingdom as red lights shined out, the forces of demons constantly reducing as they were transferred back to the demon world. The powerful demon king Asmodeus oversaw the retreat as he stood atop the head of the old ruler of the draconic kingdom and wildly released his power. The retreat was very quick and unexpected that even the mythical kingdom's forces had no time to move as they watched cautiously. When the day turned into night, only Asmodeus and a bone dragon were left standing at the center of Draconic Kingdom. Asmodeus looked around the lands he already had under his control and thought about the ones he missed just because of this one incident. His heart was ablaze in flames just like all the other rulers about the death of two demon kings, but it seemed he was still too weak to do anything about it. A red light began to shine out from him that covered the entirety of his body, and the bony figure of the mythical undead dragon as the most powerful demon king in the beast world disappeared. Chapter 132 Baffling. An unexplainable sight had occurred as those watching the movements of forces around the continent found the demons making a hasty retreat towards the Draconic Kingdom. None of the mythical kingdoms moved their forces to attack as they followed cautiously, having learned their lesson of how wicked the demons could be. Yet it didn't seem to be a plot. As the moment dawn broke, golden light shone through the skies into the occupied Draconic Kingdom, showing an empty site with no demons to be seen. The beasts that had been enslaved in the surrounding lands found themselves waking up to find the people torturing them every day gone. Those that saw the retreat were even more baffled as they watched it happen. In the skies of the Draconic Kingdom, three powerful beings floated as they looked down at the destruction the demons left behind. It was a gloriously glowing blue turtle that had a wizened expression, a fiery red phoenix whose fire blazed across the skies, and a white tiger that had white shining fur letting out a blinding light. They looked at the destruction the demons left behind as they moved their forces to multiple positions across the fallen kingdom. All they found left behind were destroyed spiritual lands and enslaved people that had already been broken. A process of long recovery would be needed, but their first actions would be to prevent something like this again. For an invasion like this to occur, a significant amount of time was needed for the powerful demons to establish the connection and break out of it. They would be manning every position they could see around the continent from now on, and at the slightest sign of a connection being made, erupt out. Their hearts were full of wrath against their enemies, but they were nowhere to be seen. I breathed heavily as I felt the excitement of taking down another demon king. This time it wasn't just from brute force, but something that took days to plan and many pieces to be in place before it occurred successfully. As the red light signifying the death of the demon shined out, I moved the explosion of items, cores, and what seemed like two powerfully glowing skillbooks into my storage pouch, RAA. The epic beasts were looking around excitedly as they saw the fall of yet another powerful legendary being, their excitement still not coming as close as when they neared the snow vines where the fruits crucial to their advancements were about to ripen. I moved out of the crater of toxic pools and frozen ice as the mangled body of a red-horned demon king made itself visible to me. Its head was perfectly nailed to the ground as it still had the expression of shock frozen on the face. I sent the beasts away from this location as there were many things that would occur after my actions and I had to move fast. First and foremost, I instantly took out and absorbed the new skills appearing from the Demon King. It was only 2 skills this time around, but my smile grew wider as they were the things I wanted to get my hands on the most. Spatial travel. You become heavily proficient in space, being able to travel to any location you've previously seen. Shapeshifter. Not a single soul can distinguish between the different forms you take. The descriptions were concise and simple, and yet these skills were the thing I was aiming for that would allow me to make significant movements from now on. If I was a ferocious tiger prowling powerfully around with my nearly endless mana before, now I was actually given wings that would make me even more terrifying. Taking down Aureas would be one of the most crucial events that would propel many of the things moving forward. The demons would no doubt take a step back after this, having taken such tremendous losses they could have never expected from their invasion into one middle world. The powerful rulers that had their ranks in the top 10 of the demon world were terrifying to think about. But I wouldn't be meeting them anytime soon. What I would be doing, though, is continue to completely disrupt their plans and eventually bring about their own destruction. The beast world wasn't my enemy. The demons that pulled the strings and Use the beasts here to massacre beings in another world would be the ones I would continue chasing until the ends of the universe. As for my actions towards the beast world from now on, I smiled at this thought as I looked at a blue crystal lying carefully in my storage pouch. I still had some time. Besides the 2 skills and cores, I was also able to get my hands on another ruler's medal for the region in the demon world that Aureas controlled, and another 2 power jewels, bringing my total to 3 and giving me many options to choose from which of my skills to enhance next. I put all of these aside for now as I sent a message to Adelaide that I might not be able to be reached for a day or 2 as I approached the body of the dead Demon King and activated Memory Plunderer. Aureas was a particularly interesting figure whose life should hold even more expansive memories than Gremory because of her unique skills. Her memories should be on the same level of rewards as the skills I gained from her. I prepared my head for the potential pain to come as the red light shined out and a long film played out before me. This time around, the pain was not as excruciating as I watched the life of this Demon King without blacking out. The memories were spectacular to say the least, as each Demon King led their own life even though they had similar goals. This was especially so for Aureas. As I watched her do the vilest things in the most spectacular ways, even more secrets opened themselves up to me as I continued to receive more of the memories. I could feel my excitement bubbling again as they continued to play, already seeing how I could use them to cause extreme mayhem and pandemonium for the demons. The process lasted a few hours as I gained something even more crucial than the powerful skills I had. And this was not exaggerating. I had to calm myself down as the memories of another being swirled around my head yet again, taking me another 2 hours before everything settled itself down and I found myself calm again. A smile bloomed on my face after this as I realized the many different paths I could take, but for now, I would do the one thing that will allow me to move forward. I knew that after the death of Aureas, the demons would be backed into a corner by their unknown enemy, with the only smart choice left for them being retreat. They would not stupidly rush headfirst into an environment where 2 of their people fell. This meant that my goal to disrupt the movements of demons in the beast world had effectively succeeded just by taking out 2 of them while playing a game that kept them in the dark. My objective for the beast world was actually achieved this way, propelled forward by many months and arduous battles from the use of the stolen memories as well as the uniqueness of the system that allowed for the true death of demons that fell through my hands. I pulled out a glowing plain crystal from my storage pouch and added mana into it, watching it float in front of me. These crystals were a unique material that allowed for the smooth transition between worlds and were not necessarily needed to travel across, but simplicity was always good to work with as much more essence would be required to form a channel otherwise. Not that this was a worry to me. The crystal expanded and struck down into the ground of the frozen plateau's spiritual land, soon forming into a monolith similar to a dungeon. The monolith was blue in color and continued to pulsate in a blue light that seemed to signal the arrival of something big. I moved back from this location as I prepared to move to another chapter of my journey. Something inexplicably even more exciting than everything I had been experiencing as I watched the monolith grandly shine out before it exploded. When the light cleared, the air around me trembled as I looked at the new arrival. It was a girl with striking blue eyes and hair as white as snow that appeared. Chapter 133, An Anomaly. The instant the white-haired girl arrived into the spiritual land, the air continued to tremble and did not seem to stop. Her fair hands moved as if grasping something in the air, her blue eyes turning a blank shade of white as the trembling came to a stop. And a voice I had not come across before rang out in my head, "My little knight in shining armor, why did you bring your master here so soon?" The voice brought a surprise to me as I didn't expect to hear this tone from another entity so soon. The tone was similar to when I talked with the planetary core from my world, but holding a bit more emotions in its words. Before I could reply, the figure of Sophia, the person who had first sent me to the beast world, spoke. "The discussion can stay between me and you. I have a proposition." The words came out of her mouth in a bland tone as they rang out, the white in her eyes gradually fading and becoming blue again as she came towards me with a smile. "Hi, big brother, you moved fast." I smiled at this figure of an innocent-looking girl as the words of the 2 planetary cores faded away from my head. That's right, with the intrusion of Sophia into this world, I had effectively brought about the consciousness of another world into the beast world. Of the things that the planetary core shared with me, the fact that Sophia could stand as the representative first shook me. But I accepted it as a fact after seeing all the other fantastical things around me. My entrance into the Beast World was to look for possible ways to disrupt the demons' plans, and causing the true death of two of their rulers did exactly just that. This unexpected development that came about after colliding with Gremry caused a vast acceleration and disrupted the ranks of demons heavily as soon as this goal was accomplished. I expected the retreat of the demons who would not want the possibilities of even more losses. I could now move on to the next task that would not be too hard to handle once. The first one was completed successfully. Every world had a consciousness, and the beast world knew of my intrusion and the intrusion of demons the same as how my own world's planetary core felt the intrusion of beasts that woke it from its slumber. They had influence in the way their world operated, but were still restricted by universal laws where they couldn't directly intervene in many cases. The planetary core of my world, though, seemed to be bent on twisting and breaking as many laws as possible. I had never heard the voice of the Beast World's core even while I was actively moving against beings she considered her enemies. The only time there was ever a semblance of a possible communication was the abnormal skills I continued to receive when I cleared a dungeon or obtained a spiritual land for the first time. Yet, the moment Sophia arrived in this world, I heard another world's voice right after. There were many things I still didn't understand, but I knew what the ultimate goal that the consciousness residing in Sophia's head had in mind. The world had taken a risk and successfully formed a connection with one of its inhabitants, granting it more leeway on just how much influence it had, yet it wanted a whole lot more than that. I felt my own weakness and took steps to get stronger so that I would never be put in that position again, and my homeworld was doing the same thing, but even more drastically. I didn't know how long the discussion between the two entities would take. So I smiled at Sophia and replied, "Let me show you around one of the unique treasures of this world while we wait." The world cores took their time, the entire process taking a few hours as I walked around the spiritual land with Sophia and showed her the abundant beasts and acres of bountiful magical produce. The snow vines were almost ready to harvest, which meant I could possibly stand a chance to upgrade the tier of the spiritual land soon. It all depended on whether the beasts that would consume them had the talent to break through to the next rank. I planted many fields of snow vines so that the chances of success stood by more than 90, but we would still have to see how things go. I was talking with Sophia when I felt the change as the blue in her eyes faded and whiteness replaced them, a bland voice coming out right after. The talks were successful. We were able to rope in another contender that should boost our power by another level as soon as the process is successfully completed. I already had an inkling of what the planetary core was talking about, but I asked just to be sure. And the replies were as crazy as usual, similarly to how the risk of forming a connection between the world and an individual was successful. Why stop there? Dangerous words that would shock anybody that heard them came out, and they weren't done as even more continued. There are many worlds spanning this universe, and from the memories you've been obtaining, we've seen that lower worlds continue to be bullied and taken over. Yes, from Gremry and the recently deceased Orias memories, the many worlds they had been on and all of their experiences played out. The invasion that my world and the beast world faced would normally end badly for the natives. And the world which the invaders claiming victory and using the world and its people for their own uses a lot of the time. There were many worlds out there that were invaded by higher beings which sent powerhouses at the peak of the level of power in that world. The natives who were just learning what strength was eventually being defeated as time passed. This changed with the anomaly that was me. The gamble that my homeworld's core took to connect me to the world allowed for a reversal that would not have been possible in the position we were in. It allowed for the vast power of a world that could not be moved because of the many restrictions surrounding it to be accessible to a single individual. The lower worlds cannot fight back. It is not logical, it is not fair. The universe seems to be bent on rules and restrictions, and yet this unfairness is still present, which means we have to find new ways for us to fight back, even if the risks are high. More and more emotions seemed to come out of the bland voice as the monologue continued. Grand words that would be the beginning of something world-changing continuing to ring out at the center of all of this. Is you. The next step that should be less risky if sufficient time is placed is to form another channel with this current world. If it fails, it will cause a destabilizing effect on both worlds, and we could see the deaths of the beings in each world by the billions. If it succeeds, it sets us up on a path on no return, where the only option is destruction or coming out as victors that would never again be bullied by higher worlds. Yes, this was the ultimate goal of the planetary core when I was sent to the beast world. If I could use my power to successfully push out invaders that were massacring the world's inhabitants and showed the world just what possibilities lay in my power, there would never be a fear of invaders appearing and causing mayhem in the world again. The planetary core had succeeded in convincing the beast world to undertake the risky plan. And now even crazier things were about to occur. I have calculated the countless possibilities, and the chance of success is high as long as a significant enough time is given to this task. When it does succeed, though, it will not be just one world you have access to the mana reserves of. You will be the sword that countless small worlds will depend on as we fight back, for we have been bullied for too long. Chapter 134 Home. Words filled with conviction and strength continued to come out of the mouth of the system as the planetary core talked with me for the first time in a while. Much of the topic this time around revolved around the memories that allowed us to see the grander picture all around us, and the different ways to move forward from now. I still had a few events to finish in the Frozen Kingdom before I began moving to another phase of this adventure. There were two paths for me to take after this, and I was pondering on just which one to take. The memories from the hundreds of years old Demon Kings were actually the biggest prize to receive so far, and they're showing two very clear ways to move forward, but I can't decide on the path to choose. I was weighing the risks and rewards, and maybe I just needed a push from someone else before taking the leap. Yes, the two best possibilities are heading to the demon world, or to the lost world of Atlantis where powerful demons and other beings are congregating to look for a supreme treasure. Atlantis will be much riskier, as the levels of power are extremely high, but the rewards are that much higher. From the memories of the Demon Kings, I knew many of the hidden secrets, especially the recently plundered Aureas, who had even more spectacular ones. One of the main objectives of the rulers of the demon world currently was to obtain the supreme treasure in the lost world of Atlantis, the Trident of Neptune. This meant many powerful demon kings and demon lords would be running rampant in that large world, and their power levels were nothing to scoff at. It would be much riskier, but as long as I clashed with the demons and killed them, I would continue to obtain the ruler's medals. From them that gave me direct authority over the demon world even without having gone there. As long as I continue collecting these medals, along with the possibility of obtaining something even more spectacular in this large world, Atlantis was the better path to take for now. The lost world of Atlantis. A dangerous light passed through my eyes as I pondered the time when I would descend in that world and disrupt the plans of demons yet again. Some time passed as ideas were thrown back and forth, and I asked about how the world I left behind some time ago was doing. Hunters from all over the Blessed Empire and United Federation were doing their best to advance through the ranks by combining their skills. Kazuhiko and Steel Mikhail had already obtained their first epic skill from combination, allowing them to lead the world forward in strength once more. Other hunters were closing in as time passed, but there was a slight delay as a few days back. Many dungeons the hunters had been diving in became permanently destroyed as the demons stopped providing any more essence to replenish the origins of the beasts in the dungeons. This caused the slow process across the world where the dungeons that were always shining orange or red gradually became light blue until they exploded. A new set of system to increase the hunter's strength needed to be introduced. The hunter's rise in power will only get faster as I will be instituting dungeons similarly to the ones in the beast world. I have absorbed enough essence from beasts and demons that you've killed to recreate versions of them into these new dungeons. The beings in the beast world would also benefit from the same system of skills that you've been used to after the new connection is established successfully. There were many things being looked at ahead of time as the planetary core continued to strategize and introduce new ways to bolster the strength of everything it was connected to. I thought about going back myself just to see some of the faces I had been around briefly when I began this adventure, but shook my head with a smile as I looked forward to moving in the next direction. The most powerful hunters in my homeworld were already at epic rank, and I was only touching the bounds of legendary. We still had a long way to go before we could be considered somewhat strong in this wide universe. I would go back and look at everyone else after I've accomplished something even more spectacular. The day after all of these events finished spectacularly, having taken down another demon king and even starting with grander plans that involved multiple worlds, tomorrow would be another eventful day where the coronation of a certain princess was occurring. I had already begun leaving my footprint behind in the Frozen Kingdom. and still wanted to see just how far the calculating princess could go in expanding the kingdom. Someone of her caliber wasn't too bad to have at the helm as one of the people leading the masses of people in the future. My homeworld and the beast world still needed competent leaders, and acting as the individual to choose them was an exciting role, to say the least. As things continued to occur in the background, the morning of the next day was celebratory as masses of people gathered around the kingdom, and especially so around the snowy peak, where a grand coronation was taking place. The coronation came with the news of the retreat of demons, confirming the actions I thought would occur after the true death of yet another ruler of the demon world. There were too many things they didn't know and could not continue to risk the lives of more of their people to an enemy they had no information about. I smiled as I found the success of my plans while I watched the ceremony taking place. Adelaide chose to stay in the peak she had been occupying, leaving her father to remain on the king's crown. All she wanted was authority, and now she was receiving it. After this, one can only imagine how rapidly the frozen kingdom can develop. Important figures were standing in a large hall in the manor located in the middle of Snowy Peak as they watched King Rourke pass down a symbolic crown on Adelaide's head. The moment the crown touched her head, a boisterous voice from one of the epic commanders rang out, "Respects to the Queen." Respects to the Queen. Woo! Cheers and exclamations rose out from all beings in the frozen kingdom as they watched their old king move to the back and prop up the new queen, even with the old king not making it an option for the people. Almost everyone unanimously went along with the anointment, as the person being made ruler was the one to rescue them miraculously from a famine, cutting it off before it could even spread. With power like this, they saw their lands only heading in the right direction thereafter. The nobles and knights found themselves kneeling down towards the new ruler as a new chapter began for the frozen kingdom. The new queen looked at her father with thankfulness as she looked at the people below her. Humans and beast men were kneeling on the ground submitting themselves to her, and yet she didn't feel any exhilaration. There was just one person she wanted to see and enjoy the company of right now, as her intuition was giving her a foreboding feeling. She had just given her aid in detecting a demon king and contributing to her downfall. With the continent receiving the news of a retreat soon after that, she was smart and knew there should have been a link to these two rapid events. Realizing the esteemed sir had most likely done something even more incredible that she had no idea about, with the retreat of demons, as well as the plans for the expansion of the kingdom with the bountiful explosion of the agricultural sector, she should be feeling great and looking forward into the future. So then, why was she experiencing a feeling as if she was about to lose something? Chapter 135, A King in the Shadows. There were still many things to be done, and I was looking forward to something spectacular tomorrow, where I would get the chance to see the next tier of a spiritual land. The snow vines had fully matured and ripened yesterday, and there was an abundant amount that many of the beasts could consume because of the effects of budding farmer. The fruits were specially made to raise the ranks of the beasts on the spiritual land, and their effects were apparent just on the past day when their consumption and absorption began. The emperor penguin was the first to successfully advance to legendary after consuming multiple fruits from the snow vines. His figure became slightly larger and more compact with the advancement, the sleek fur on his body becoming even glossier as the arrogant heir returned. His origin was injured beforehand, and yet he was still the one to advance towards the next rank first. His attitude aside, I was happy about this, as the more talented beasts like him appeared, the faster I could upgrade the spiritual land after meeting the requirements. One of the requirements that was about to be met was the advancement of beasts born in the spiritual land to become legendary. 5 beasts had to undergo this transformation before the first condition was met. As for the second condition, I smiled as I thought about it and heard movement from the large hall that was boisterous with celebration. It was now a few hours after the coronation that I watched in the dark while I was veiled. The celebration would continue throughout the night, but the new queen rose from the throngs of nobles and stepped out from the hall while being led by an epic guard. Adelaide's own rank should be raised soon enough, as I'd already given her access to an abundant amount of epic cores, sacred rye, and even the fruits from the snow vine that were much less effective on beings not born in the spiritual land. The queen's face had slight delight showing as I heard her voice ring out silently beside my ear. "Esteemed sir, if you would please follow me." The guards were left behind as the queen entered her grandiose room with the excuse of resting. The shadow guards took their hidden positions as the newly instituted epic guard stood in front of the closed doors. my figure flashed into the grandiose room, being met with the sight of the icy queen who seemed to have a complicated expression on her face. I feel like I've achieved something, and yet, at the same time, am feeling something else I cannot explain. She seemed to be thinking about many things as she spoke, her gaze landing on my calm figure and becoming even troubled. She seemed to have made up her mind as she moved with a brave face and kneeled down towards me. I can't shake this feeling, but there is still something that I can do. I was about to tell her to rise up for what seemed like the third or fourth time as she had done this before, when her next actions threw me a curveball. Her white hands reached behind her and unclasped the grandiose white dress she wore. It slid down her body as she looked up at me with conviction in her eyes. My king. In the spiritual land, a powerful emperor penguin with his beak raised high was overseeing the advancement of his brothers. The long white mamba was coiling around itself as its body pulsed a white light, its breakthrough imminent after absorbing so many of the blue-gold fruits from the snow vines. These fruits were multiple times better to these beasts born in this spiritual land than even cores of the next level normally. They would be extremely rare for them to obtain, as close to 8 months were needed before they matured and ripened. Even when they did, their output was extremely low, yet budding farmer had thrown all of this logic down the drain. There was an abundance of the fruits now growing and glistening blue and gold all over frozen plateau spiritual land, where the epic beasts had their pick with the permission of their master, and even the leaders that were rank S received their own share. The sleek penguin observed this unbelievable growth that should have never been possible, even with all the possibilities of the spiritual land. He looked at the white mamba, winged spider, and many other beasts that were trying their best to put their experience to use and break through to the next rank after absorbing treasures specifically catered to them. Maybe his master wasn't too bad after all? A scene that would shock many was playing itself out in a grand room where barriers preventing peering eyes were erected. A young woman was laying her head on the chest of a man and tracing the protruding lines from the chest to the abdominal muscles as her crystal eyes seemed clouded. "You're not staying, are you?" Instinctively, Adelaide had seemed to understand what the foreboding feeling she continued to have was. Everything seemed to be on the right track, with the invaders retreating and their kingdom headed for extreme growth and expansion. Yet, when thinking about the man whose hands made all of this possible, where did he fit in all of this right now? Would he stay, enjoy, and revel on the rewards of the things he had accomplished? Adelaide had been around him for many days these past few weeks, and somewhat understood his mindset, even if it was just a bit. The man in question heard the words as his eyes stared into the ceiling, not knowing exactly what to say. "They'll still come by. There are just too many things to be done, and even those that retreated from the fight right now did just that, only a retreat. The threat still exists." There was a period of silence as the girl just continued to trace the lines of muscle. "You could always just stay, relax, and kick back. Watch as the thing you've just begun creating bloom into something beautiful. I haven't even given you the empire I promised, much less the world." Noah gave a mysterious smile at these words as he replied, "I'm relaxing now, and that's enough for me. They'll see if I can relax like this every now and then when I find the time." The night was long, with many people spending it thinking about the future while not fully living in the present. Early morning of the next day, something magical was happening in the skies of the frozen kingdom. In the middle of the 4 peaks floating in the sky, a 5th one had appeared. Those knowledgeable would be able to recognize this peak as the Sky Peak nest that had disappeared mysteriously some time ago, while others just watched in shock at the appearance of it. It seemed to be glowing in shades of white and blue as boundless essence began congregating in the skies, in the center of the spiritual land. Noah was looking at the 5th beast that was successfully promoted to the legendary tiers by consuming and absorbing the inordinate amount of fruits from the snow vines. The process had only taken the span of a few days, but they achieved the stupendous results of the rise of 5 legendary powerhouses. This number was shocking, as there were still 10 other epic beasts on the frozen plateau spiritual land that had consumed the same treasures and might have the talent to break through soon enough, not to mention the rank S leaders that were trying their best to achieve the same result. If you took into account the strength of someone like Demon King Gremory, who was ranked 56 among the rulers of the demon world, and held the power equivalent to 3 legendary beings with his unique skill, you would become even more astounded by the treasure that was the spiritual land. It could give rise to powerhouses like this, but it was normally never as explosive, The unfair skill that was budding farmer made it possible for this event that defied the norms and created 5 legendary beings in a few days. Yes, these were the beasts that had the top talent in their level and just needed the stimulus and energy to break through. Yes, maybe there won't be others as talented that would rise as fast as they did, but that was still the genuine advancement of 5 legendary beasts. It would still give a shock at the speed in which it was achieved, beside the suave emperor penguin and deadly white mamba, the winged spider, snow leopard, and a winged golden eagle that was among the epic beasts to not participate in the trial of supremacy. All stood proudly as they looked around the spiritual land that seemed to be trembling. In excitement, the first requirement in order to upgrade to the next tier of the spiritual land was now met. 5 beasts born from the land itself had risen to the legendary rank. Now came the second requirement. This requirement was one that evaded many beasts and caused their spiritual lands to be stuck at the second level for many years. It was a requirement dependent on the master of the spiritual land, as it was not only the beasts born in it that should be strong, but also its master simply. The second requirement needed the owner of the spiritual land to be powerful enough and have a large reserve of mana that many in the legendary stage struggled to have in order to catalyze the transformation of the next tier. A light laugh escaped Noah's mouth as he couldn't help but raise his hands into the air and watch the explosion of essence around him. The figure of Sophia could be seen standing serenely by his side as she watched the show in fascination. Noah looked around him excitedly as he waited to see what surprises this unique treasure of the beast world would provide for him in the future. It gave him an unscratchable itch of wanting to look for even more unique treasures across the many worlds out there. He thought of his tremendously risky destination that was the lost world of Atlantis, where he would go to next. It was a world where many powerhouses from multiple origins descended in as they all looked for this large world's supreme treasure, the Trident of Neptune. From the memories of the 2 demon kings he had plundered, the one that stood atop all the demons in the demon world was also in this world, searching and bolstering his forces. At the thought of an oppressively powerful being that was his enemy, Noah's heart palpitated in excitement, many thoughts and ideas passing through his mind as he watched the birth of a third-tier spiritual land and the new functions it would unlock. Chapter 136, Tier 3 Spiritual Land. The congregation of essence in the skies of the frozen kingdom was palpitating as the old king and many others looked at the appearance of this large floating landmass with caution. The sight of the queen standing calmly surrounded by her epic guard on Snowy Peak calmed many as a message came across soon after for none of them to worry. The scene in front of them was spectacular, to say the least, as they looked at this floating landmass that was pulsating with light as if it wanted to expand. The mixtures of blue and white roiled around the spiritual land as the transformation continued. The beasts in the frozen plateau spiritual land were moving excitedly as they watched the upgrade of the next tier occur. The congregation of mana allowing for the birth of new beasts to be visible to the naked eye. Noah was observing the constantly changing panel under spiritual land management as he observed the continuing process. The catalysis from him had occurred, and all that was left now was to wait as the process completed itself. Essence continued to congregate as the panel under the unique skill changed, and soon enough on the section that listed the tier of the spiritual land, the number 3 appeared, a blinding blue, and while light resplendently shone all around at the completion of the process, as a brand new spiritual land stood in the skies. The size was only slightly larger, but it seemed to give a sense of pressure as it towered over the heads of the beings below it. The beasts cheered as their home gained an upgrade, which meant they would have even more chances to increase their strength in the future with the passage of time. Noah looked at the spiritual land management panel expectantly while observing the changes around him. Spiritual land management, frozen plateau, 3, beasts, FXXX, EXXX, D24, 650, C 9432, B 5436, A 465, S 85, Epic 15, Legendary 5. Plants, whitefall trees, snow vine, sacred rye, available for planting, ice fire persimmon, pygmy melon. Features, size regulation unlocked, movement unlocked, anchor unlocked, boost surroundings unlocked, architecture unlocked, frozen barrier unlocked. Offensive maneuvers locked, email protected locked, time dilation locked, email protected locked. Upgrade. Conditions not met, 3 new features had been unlocked with the upgrade of the Frozen Plateau spiritual land. Noah looked at the one he had been eyeing when he chose to let the upgrade happen in the center of the Frozen Kingdom. It was a feature that seemed straightforward, simply being boost surroundings, so what effect did it have on the surroundings? A tremendous amount of mana coursed through Noah's body as he clicked on the feature in the panel, his figure flashing away from the inner parts of the spiritual land and appearing higher in the skies to watch the transformation. The blue and white light that had just died down began shining brightly again, this time going around to encompass the 4 peaks around it as well as a portion of the Frozen Kingdom below. The blue and white light went around every nook and corner of affected lands, leaving a new environment as it receded back into the spiritual land. Soon after, the people felt the land they were in begin to feel much different as the air became easier to breathe in and they could feel a denser collection of essence surrounding them. On the many acres of land spread out around the kingdom, the produce yet to be harvested shined ever so brighter as even the land seemed to be affected by boost surroundings. Noah watched the results of the wide buff that seemed to cover thousands of miles as he became shocked at the effects of a spiritual land once more. This feature that increased the concentration of essence around its surroundings would remain active over time, only reducing in its effectiveness after around 2 months. Adelaide was surrounded by guards that were looking around them dumbfoundedly. She had thought she couldn't be any more surprised, but it seemed she continued to be wrong. Beside the amazement and wonder that she felt, there was still a tinge of sadness as this seemed to be a goodbye gift, even if the goodbye would be short and he would be back sometime soon. In the skies, Noah's figure flashed away and reappeared in the inner parts of the spiritual land after observing the effects of boost surroundings. The next feature he was itching to try was architecture, another plain name, but he would undoubtedly be surprised at what it did. Clicking on this feature expanded it to give a wide array of options for what the user of the spiritual land management wanted to do. When it said architecture, it really did mean just that. Grand buildings that could be seen all across the Frozen Kingdom were showing themselves in a blue holographic format, but those were not the only thing. Skyscrapers, houses, and other modern buildings that were definitely not from the Beast world were also possible as options to choose from, giving a wide array of choices on what to do. Besides, these were also classical and Gothic architecture he had only seen in his homeworld in the past. There were many possibilities, but he started with a simple one first and selected a modern home that you would only find the extremely rich be able to afford and play with. The selection of the hologram caused essence to roil in the air as on the snowy land of the spiritual land, a structure was being erected. The soil, trees, and everything around it seemed to be used as they faded into particles of light. And something new that was visible to the naked eye was forming. Noah watched in amazement as an elegant and sophisticated modern home built itself in front of his eyes. The house had 3 levels and seemed to be made of mostly reinforced glass and concrete. The land around it became leveled as small white fall trees seemingly rearranged and surrounded the house elegantly. It felt like he had returned back into an old time as he flashed near the door of the house and went in. There was a cool air flowing in the house as a symmetrical formation of luxury fluffy leather couches were in the living room. A rectangular structure was elevated as it had blue flames waving beautifully atop it, giving the room a serene look. There was a simple styled kitchen shining smoothly in another section of the house, showing a large fridge and other structures you would normally not see in a world like this. On the second level, there were multiple rooms with large beds that seemed to scream softness, each room having its own private balcony with reinforced glass surrounding it. On the third level was a wider expanse of rooms as a glass pool was presently covering more than half of this topmost floor. The pool had steam and bubbles dancing off of the clear water as it invited people to come and enjoy. Noah looked at this astounding sight around him as he realized he had yet to understand just how ridiculous the management skill and the spiritual land he held could be. Chapter 137, Advancing. There were still many things yet to be checked out as the ones that were looked at continued to bring more and more surprises. There were new plants that would undoubtedly have even more spectacular effects to look at, as well as the third feature that was unlocked. The frozen barrier. It seemed like a significant amount of time would have to be given just to play around with architecture, but that could wait for later. Noah wanted to check one last feature before he began moving towards the Next steps laid out in his mind, he clicked on the last feature, Frozen Barrier, as he felt the congregation of essence erupt yet again. This time around, it formed into runic sigils that appeared in a circular formation around the spiritual land. The blue sigils shone and had complex lines connecting and running around, coming all together to form a huge net that covered the entirety of the spiritual land that was larger than a city. When every single runic sigil connected, a transparent blue shield formed over the spiritual land. It shone a light blue light all around as it made the floating landmass look even more magnificent. This frozen barrier was a feature of the spiritual land that allowed a protective barrier that defended against most attacks from those at the legendary stage. If you were to hide like a turtle in a shell in your spiritual land, the barrier would only be broken through when attacks continued to rain down until the reserves of energy being used to maintain it rang out. Noah watched the strong barrier surrounding him and then observed after 1 minute as it began to fade. It was a barrier that was powerful enough to block attacks from legendary beings as long as mana was provided. It would not come without its restrictions. The frozen barrier could only be activated once every 24 hours, and it provided ultimate defense against the spiritual land's invaders for an entire minute before the runic sigils faded away for another use 24 hours later. Noah smiled at this stupendous defense as his eyes moved to the legendary beasts around the spiritual land. They were at their happiest now and moved around with vigor. He would put them to work as soon as he began moving. He would check out the other new things later as his hands reached towards the spiritual land once again, this time using size regulation as the grandiose floating landmass became small with speed visible to the naked eye. The landmass shrunk down until it could be placed on the palm of his hands as the hidden Noah, who was only visible as a blinding light towards a certain queen, used anchor to attach the spiritual land to himself. He then moved with excitement as he activated a new skill which would become one of his main cards to propel him even further as time passed. Spatial travel. The unique skill was an upgraded teleport essentially, just much better with a whole lot less restrictions. The unique thing about the skill was that it allowed you to transfer to a place that you had seen. As long as you had been to any place and seen it, you could go back to it as you wished, the further the distance you wanted to travel. The more mana you needed before the skill could be activated to bring you to the position you had in your head. The skill made it possible for Aureas to do many crazy things, with one of them being traveling across the worlds she had been to as she wished. She bypassed the making and using of plain crystals to go across worlds and simply used her skill to get there. And now Noah would be doing the same. He had a light smile on his face as he thought back to an area he was in not too long ago. Blinding red light flashed as the unique skill, spatial travel, was activated, and Noah's figure flashed away. Just as it had appeared, the floating landmass disappeared from the skies of the frozen kingdom. The only thing it left behind was the boosted environment that had a higher concentration of essence, as well as the amazement and dumbfoundedness of those that saw it. The 4 peaks and the land that was affected by the buff shone brilliantly. The old king looked towards his kingdom as he felt a semblance of peace, while the newly anointed queen looked into the skies with a sad expression. Noah had talked about all of these events and how he would start moving soon. After that, he would be able to come back routinely to check how things were going. There would not be any approaching enemies anytime soon, and in the case there was any, he promised to come back in a blink of an eye. But if there wasn't any danger to save them from, when would he actually take the time to come back? Would it be a week, month, or even more? She recalled the many epic cores and a few legendary cores he had left for her to do as she saw fit. The expression of the new queen had a tinge of sadness as these thoughts passed through her. The Shadow Guard knight was observing her lady with a complicated expression as she found the one she served to be showing more and more emotions she had never seen before, especially today. What had happened to give her an air that made her seem like a brand new woman? Her questions wouldn't be answered, as the truth was something that wasn't even an option in her head. She knew very little of the movements of the esteemed sir. But the miraculous event that just happened now was definitely through his hands. Now, when would they see him again? At the same time as these thoughts passed through the mind of the Shadow Guard, a fiery red light was crossing the skies towards the frozen kingdom from another location in the continent. The Imperial Phoenix that Noah had come across and provided the help that allowed him to obtain the spiritual land was coming to check just how this human had progressed, as well as understand his clash with the Demon King and how it was connected with the retreat of demons from their world. There were many questions passing through her head, but they would not be getting answers anytime soon as the person she was looking for had just disappeared from the beast world. A flash of red light, and Noah's first spatial travel across two worlds from the use of a skill had occurred. He appeared in the skies of the small village that was surrounded by a light barrier that protected them from many things in the outside world. Landing on the ground, Sophia's figure flashed out from the spiritual land as she looked at her home with a smile. "Big brother, how much time will you spend here?" Here. The here she was talking about wasn't just the mountain and village they were on, but the world they stood on. "Not too long. There are still many things to do, and I can't waste it needlessly." There were a few people he actually wanted to see. The confident Kazuhiko that was now epic ranked, the woman that was taking charge of a small city where he came to prominence, and the stout man with a spear that stood as the protector of the empire. "I'll give a few people a visit some other time before the journey to the Lost World starts. I will just give a little help to their lands." The spectacular sight of him traveling across worlds with a skill had just finished, and he was about to move with the spiritual land to boost the environments of the places where most humans congregated to increase their power. Chapter 138. A landmass appears above skyscrapers. It was a bustling day as usual in the Blessed Empire. And today it was bustling even more as a momentous event occurred. After days where almost all the dungeons in the world began breaking down permanently, in the last 24 hours, new ones had begun appearing. Hunters and governments had been gravely worried that the rate at which they increased their strength would drastically reduce without the constant supply of cores, skills, and items. But their worries did not last too long. A few days after the initial panic, huge monoliths began appearing around the world once more. The monoliths were different than the ones they had been used to, as they appeared black and did not have a change in color over time. They never would have thought that they would be happy at the sight of dungeons, but people moved eagerly after these new ones appeared. They worked differently compared to the old ones, and the hunters would learn more about their secrets as time went on. The bustling day-to-day was interrupted by the appearance of something nobody could have guessed in their wildest dreams. Above the skies of the small city in the periphery of the Blessed Empire, a floating landmass that entirely blocked the skies appeared. The landmass caused surprise and panic on many hunters as they thought an unexpected attack had arrived yet again, and they were preparing themselves as they watched a blue light expanding from the landmass. The light went on to cover every nook and cranny of the small city, lasting for a few seconds as the people in it began feeling the air around them change. A dense collection of essence was swirling around the city, and amazing scenes could be seen playing out in one location. A child that was on a swing set found himself thrown in the air as he used too much force, and surprisingly landed on the ground unharmed as he began to feel unknown strength coursing through him. A status panel appeared on his eyes soon after, as he stupendously realized he had somehow awakened. Those that had some talent and luck found themselves with a status panel appearing in front of their eyes as many people underwent their awakening to become hunters all over the city, the converging essence being a catalyst for such a surprising event. The veteran hunters found themselves being able to move faster and easier as if they were constantly receiving a buff from the air around them. They moved ecstatically as they stared at the landmass blocking the sky. A top hunter and admiral in Star City who held multiple S+ skills and was now a peak rank S, Elizabeth, was looking stupidly at the floating landmass as the air around her continued to change. She watched with surprise as just as it had appeared, the landmass began shrinking rapidly before it disappeared in the blink of an eye. She thought that she felt a gaze land on her in an instant from the disappearing landmass. As she shook her head in confusion, clear skies returned as things returned to normal. But the city itself had experienced a huge change. This scene repeated itself many times over the areas of the Blessed Empire where most people were congregated, as a magically floating spiritual land appeared and disappeared, leaving behind a changed environment where the essence had become increasingly dense. This process was already happening naturally as the world continued to grow, and the levels of essence in the air would sooner or later reach a similar level as that of the beast world. But just like how the lands in the Frozen Kingdom benefited from boost environment, the cities around the empire that experienced the same thing benefited even more when the spiritual land appeared in the skies of the capital. Steel Mikhail stood proudly in the air, two spears rotating around him as the air crackled with power. He felt the changing of the air as the newly appeared landmass continued to release a blue light that covered everything. His mind shifted to a certain man that had left not too long ago. Was it even just over a month? Had he obtained something this spectacular so quickly? Mikhail thought of H's own power as he looked up to see the floating landmass disappearing. He was somewhat glad that the person inside of it did not come down. He felt ashamed as he thought he was strong enough when he combined his skills to gain the power of epic rank. But it seemed he was still far behind that man who was chasing their enemies who knew where. Still, Mikhail felt the air around him that seemed to open up his pores and fill him with strength as his sight turned to the large monolith which appeared at the center of the empire a few days ago. The monolith was ranked to be an epic rank dungeon. And even now it was not fully explored. He would prepare his team and dive down into this dungeon over the coming weeks, training his skills as much as he could and increasing his strength. He could not lag behind someone that was fighting for all them too much. He knew his role as the protector, but was slightly envious of the things outside this world he hadn't yet gotten a chance to see. When would the chance come in the future for him to explore the unknown places out there? Many countries in the United Federation found themselves experiencing a similar occurrence with the floating landmass. The event would later be termed simply as a worldwide buff, as many places experienced elevated levels of essence that caused the awakening and strengthening of many individuals. With the advent of new dungeons that were not undergoing dungeon breaks if they weren't constantly cleared, along with this new occurrence, the hopes of the humans were extremely high. A surprising sight had played itself out in the United Federation when the floating landmass first appeared, where its top hunter, Kazuhiko, bolted into the skies trying to reach it. Hey, hey, hey. His screams rang out in the skies as he stood on a katana surrounded by darkness which was propelling him further into the skies. He didn't care for the dense essence filling the air as he bolted towards the landmass at even faster speeds. He found it to be shrinking as he neared it, seemingly about to escape his grasp. His figure flew even faster as he tried to reach it before it disappeared, but it flashed away, and so did his figure. This was the first case that people noticed and talked about later where a hunter had reached and gone inside the floating landmass. It continued to appear and disappear all over the countries that held a significant amount of people in the next hour, where the figure of Kazuhiko also flashed out as the last country was covered by the blue light. Hunters and governments would call and ask Kazuhiko exactly what he saw in the floating landmass when he reappeared, but the reckless hunter didn't give any answers. People only found him to be diving into the newly appeared dungeons with even more and more vigor, occasionally screaming out how he wanted to see demhumans and own his own land. Chapter 139, The Lost World. The frozen plateau spiritual land appeared in the skies of the hidden village once again, where Noah was sighing exasperatedly at the guy that chased after the spiritual land. He saw the amazing things on it and asked about the place Noah had gone to, his eyes flaring as he wanted to go there himself. This was something that would be easily possible with time, so he was told to wait some more as he got stronger. Power at the epic rank would not be too big a deal in places that had mythical monsters. The advancement of his and Steel Mikhail's strength would be under the eyes of Sophia from now, as they were about to come in contact with their benefactor sometime in the future. Noah breathed out in relaxation after having spent the inordinate amount of time teleporting across the two superpowers as he used the boost environment feature of the spiritual land. This allowed for the increased rate of strengthening for the hunters in his homeworld. His eyes were now looking at a whole other location as he finished talking with Sophia in the hidden village. Many plans and possibilities were discussed with the system, also known as the planetary core. As the next location was decided, something wondrous was about to occur. As another usage of the memories obtained from the Demon Kings was going to happen, the unique skill obtained from Aureas allowed the user to travel to any location they had seen before. This was the description of the skill, plain and simple. So then what about places and locations you have seen from the plundered memories of your enemies? Memories usually remained with the person that experienced them. They could talk about them or explain them to others, but they were theirs to keep. The skill Memory Plunderer allowed Noah to take the memories of his enemies and experience them as if they were his own. This naturally meant that through the memories from Gremory and Aureas, he had seen many locations and places. This coincided with the spectacular, unique skill that allowed for spatial travel to any location you had seen before. As the combination brought about something that would normally never be possible, Noah smiled as he looked at the particular memories of the lost world of Atlantis that Aureas had descended in before. This was a large world, one level higher than the beast world, and had the besieging of many beings from multiple origins. The reason the Atlantis has the words lost world attached to it was because of its uniqueness. The inhabitants of Atlantis were so technologically and magically advanced that they created something from the combination of technology and magic which allowed them to shield and hide their world from being located. This was something that would rarely be found across the universe, thus the large world gained the title of Lost. Over the years, though, beings that wanted the technology and treasures in Atlantis did not give up and used their own mystical means to locate and find the appetizing world. The demon world was among those that succeeded in getting the coordinates of the lost world of Atlantis. With the unique skill that Aureas held, they were never able to lose sight of it again, as whenever the Atlanteans activated their terrifying technology that moved their world and hid to a different location, Aureas could still use her unique skill to go back into the world she had already been to and seen. Their coordinates were thus always in the hands of the demons. In this world, there were many things that Noah would come across, but there were a few things he was paying attention to. First and foremost was the demons running around in the world, the unique treasures, and even possibly the supreme treasure that everyone was searching for, as well as the beings from other worlds besides the demons that would undoubtedly be looking for the same things in Atlantis. Everything seemed to be in order as the spiritual land was safely anchored to Noah's body. The preparations fully complete for this next stage of the journey, Sophia stood outside the hidden village as her eyes flashed shades of white and blue, becoming a face filled with conviction that would soon return to an innocent one as the seconds passed. Left with her were some legendary focus cores and various epic cores that she could use any way she wanted, whether to be given to the protectors of this world or used to first strengthen the body where true consciousness resided was up to her. Noah looked through the memories obtained from Aureas about the lost world as he closed his eyes and chose the starting location. The unique skill, spatial travel, was activated as a tremendous amount of mana was consumed to fuel this travel across the universe into a world that was tucked away in mystery. His figure disappeared in a flash of red light, heading to unknown lands where many things awaited. Today's combined skills: Pierce plus Executor's Speed, we got A plus Piercing Speed; Flight plus Instant Transfer, we got A plus Warp Flight; Regal Archer's Eyes plus Sense Heat; Source, we got A plus Searching Thermal Sight; Immutable Regeneration plus Paladin's Blessing, we got S Blessed Regeneration; Arctic Zone plus Pursuing Infernal Lightning, we got S Pursuing Spirit of Ice and Flames; Devastation plus Aura of the Demented, we got Epic Hellish Descent; Windborne plus Hidden Endeavor, we got Epic Auralus; Noah Osmont, Occupation Hunter; Vitality 431, Focus none; Strength 437, Skills A. Recorder 100, Language Comprehension 100, Lion's Roar 100, Silent Communication 100, Cook 59, A+, Relegator Spear 100, Water King's Skin 100, Piercing Speed 1, Warp Flight 1, Searching Thermal Sight 1, S. Enfeeble 100, Phoenix Arrow 1, Shield Slam 8, Budding Farmer 71, Ricocheting Shield 1, Bear's Fighting Style 1, Archer's Gamble 1, Smoldering Sword Strike 100, Earthen Spears 100, Thought Acceleration 100, Crisis Avoidance 100, Illusory Cover 100, Blessed Regeneration 1, Pursuing Spirit of Ice and Flames 1, S+, Draconic Armor 99, Epic Corrupted Sword Saints Incarnation 91, Iceberg 89, Absolute 0-92, Bone Spears 88, Bear Emperor's Fur 91, Lifesteal 89, Teleport 95, Arctic Breath 87, Summon Holy Blight 98, Hellish Descent 1, Auralus 1, Legendary Corrupted Sigil of Hegemony 68, Demon King's Hockey 55, Memory Plunderer 5, Unique Spiritual Land Management, Primal Conjurer, Spatial Travel, Shapeshift, Equipment 3x, Bearing of Storage, Airing of Storage, S Storage Pouch, S Veiled Suit, Epic Kingslayer, Epic Rat King's Mask, Epic Prismatic Guardian, Epic Unshattered Charity, Epic Tiger Eyes Roots. Chapter 140, Atlantean. A flash of red light, brief darkness, and then a shining blue light stretching itself across the horizon. The process of arriving in the lost world of Atlantis was that fast with the use of spatial travel. It felt as if Noah had just strolled from one corner of the land to another, but it was actually across many stars before arriving at a place in Orias's memory. He opened his eyes to a clear blue sky, and even clearer blue colors below him as the sea moved by every single corner of the skies. That he turned to all showed a vast array of the body of water stretching across the horizon. There were calm waves moving by as almost all life could be sensed in the sea. Noah knew he was looking at the wrong places as he smiled and activated another unique skill. Shapeshifter. The painful sound of bones and the human structure being changed rang out as the body he had always been used to rapidly began changing. The process was quick, which cut the pain short and allowed for a rapid transformation to occur. His body changed and soon became the depiction of something he had seen among the many memories, one of the native species of this lost world that was known as the Atlantean. They were an interesting species, having a body similar to that of humans, but with extra features that adapt under the heavy pressure of the sea and the amphibious characteristics that allowed them to breathe underwater. Of course, someone of the legendary rank would not have trouble surviving underwater due to the lack of oxygen with the power they held, but this change to become an Atlantean was not for the purpose of just adapting to the sea. Noah felt his new body that seemed to match everything he had seen in the memories. From the general outlook to their soft and moist skin all over his body, not too much had changed with his body. The only thing vastly different was the golden hair that replaced the dark one he had been born with. He felt the actual physiological changes when his body began sinking into the sea. A feeling of likeness entered his mind the moment he touched the water as he sunk completely into the sea and opened his eyes to a brand new world. He was looking at the wrong places when he stared in the skies as he arrived. And now he was beginning to see the fantastical sight of the world teeming with life. All sorts of organisms he hadn't seen before were visible as Noah used the recently combined searching thermal sight to quickly locate many of the beings around him. The cold-blooded organisms that took the temperatures of their surroundings were still clearly visible to him with the use of the skill. With a single thought, the skill allowed his eyes to hone in on the direction and being he was thinking of. On this surface layer where he was in, he could only see many organisms with the characteristics of fish swimming around. Their bodies glimmered as their colorful scales whizzed by, their speed being something you don't normally see. If he wanted to get the chance to see more important things, he had to go much deeper into the sea. A smile appeared on Noah's face as he felt the comfortableness of being underwater with the body of an Atlantean under the water. He opened his mouth to hear words and sounds coming out with no problems, the vibrations of his voice traveling in the water as if he was in the air. Even if his voice could not be heard, he still had silent communication to imitate, one of the traits of Atlanteans that he would no doubt come across soon. The Atlantean species was loved by the sea, and they received boosts in their power whenever they fought in their natural habitat. Noah had no problem adapting to the new body as he began moving around using warp flight. With this combined skill, he could fly while at the same time transferring around nearby locations as he chose. The speed, even faster than before, having gotten used to the new feeling and seeing breathing come to him even easier than when he was in the air. Noah's figure barreled down deeper into the sea, very keen to meet the inhabitants and fully start his journey. He used his skills to actively sense for and look as he dived deeper and deeper, the first location already laid out in his mind. In the vast sea, a few nautical miles away from a city that was known as Laquinia, a brutal scene was playing itself. Out, 3 Atlanteans were surrounding another species that was native to the lost world, known as the merfolk. There was a clear distinction between Atlanteans and merfolk, with the latter having the lower half of a fish most of the time. This time, a particular merman was injured and continued to take heavy hits from the Atlanteans around him, a gruff voice ringing out from the leader. "You should not have followed us, Sud. Our employer is very thorough and does not allow any mistakes. I am sorry." The Atlantean with golden hair seemed sorry as his apathetic voice rang out, the green trident in his hands shining with a black light as it went towards the chest of the merman Thuck. It sank in with little resistance as Sud, the merman, looked at his friend in shock. "Son twos, we grew up together. Why collude with GH?" Painful words came out as bright green neon blood dyed the sea. with a dying sound from the merman coming out in the end as the one that he considered a friend twisted the trident in his chest and took his life. The cruel look remained on the Atlantean's face as he pulled out the trident and swung it to the side. He was about to tell the two beside him to take care of the body when another voice rang out before his. Wow, I chance upon murder as the first thing I see? The voice seemed to contain calm and curiousness, turning the face of the Atlantean grim as without even giving a single second to understand who just appeared. A command left his mind and entered the minds of the two beside him. Attack. The command rang out in their heads, and in the next second, there were 3 Atlanteans hoisting green tridents as their figures bolted where the voice was coming from. Water rapidly rotated around them as their speed increased, nearing the position of the voice in an instant. The tridents glowed green as they waited to hear the sound of flesh being pierced. A sound did come, but not the one they expected. Swoosh. A terrifying feeling overcame the 3 Atlanteans as they felt their tridents hit nothing, and a second after began seeing green blood flowing out of them as it quickly froze over. The area around them had become enclosed in ice as a long blade passed through each of their bodies and took their lives. Absolute Zero had a killer effect in the sea as it stopped the movement of anything in its range, while the long blade being wielded sliced apart the rank S Atlanteans as if they were nothing. The curious voice that had come upon the scene of murder rang out once again. Now, what stories will your memories tell?